and we are live, fashionably late by a minute or two, but Lydia is definitely worth
Fashionably.
waiting for. Yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah.
important to be fashionably late, especially on a Saturday morning where there's like
Yes.
probably no one awake yet and a lot of people overseas that are definitely asleep.
I know. Yeah. And I was kind of poking and I'm like, listen, we're going on early enough that, some people in the UK could come in and enjoy it. But for us here in Canada and the US, a lot of people are still sleeping in after having a really good time on a Friday night. We did have Spooky Noodles that popped in for a second there, but I hope he comes back. He snuck away for a little bit. But yeah, let's just jump right into chit chatting because people will flow in as we go. And if not, then of course there's always people after the fact that will come by this. So today we get to talk with the wonderful Lydia Peever, who is also Typical Books on YouTube, one of our own, our fellow booktubers. Lydia, why don't you chat a little bit about yourself, tell people a little bit about you, even though I'm sure so many people know all about you and absolutely adore you.
Oh, well, I'm not very interesting. I'm just this regular girl. I like loud noises and I like reading books. That's one thing I
Yes.
do. I also write sometimes. And yeah, I'm a writer that lives in Ottawa, Canada. I used to live in the northern wilds of Ontario, so I'm definitely a country girl at heart. And you can find that thread running through a lot of my writing. And I am currently, I volunteer with the Horror Writers Association. I do their new releases page, which is super fun. I've been doing that for about 6 years. And I write as well. And I have a podcast and yet another podcast. One is Typical Books, which is a mirror of the YouTube show, which you may be familiar with. And that's how I met Nichi, of course, through YouTube, like a lot of us booktubers have. And Dead Air, splatterpictures.net. Me and Wes Knight have had a podcast for over 10 years talking horror films. And what else do I do? I'm a federal employee full time. And what else do I do? I used to teach, but I don't anymore.
My goodness, you were one busy lady. Kudos to you. I didn't realize you had so many podcasts. I knew of a few of them, but I didn't know that you, oh my goodness. I
It's,
admire you that
yeah,
much more now.
thank you. And there's some of my writing. Uh, Quite a few readers have discovered my writing by listening to the Wicked Library. And I listen to the Wicked Library and sometimes the other night story shows like The Lift. And a few of my stories have definitely been on the Wicked Library, and I love the Wicked Library. And I have done a few little tiny guest spots, and that definitely whet my appetite for doing a little more voice work, maybe. And with the new podcast, I do have a monthly podcast that comes out that's a longer subscriber only podcast where I interview authors and talk about writing and stuff and books and talk about all the new releases coming out, not just HWA. And Elizabeth Sagewood, another booktuber that I
Mm,
admire that you may be familiar with.
adore
Um,
her too. She's close to me too. We keep
and
talking about
yeah,
one
more
day.
Canada.
Yeah, one day we got to hang out because we're quite close. And I'm like, yes, we got to do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, yeah, we should have a Canadian corner booktuber hangout some night, definitely.
Yes.
But she'd mentioned like I should do more voice work, and the little bits that I've done, it's like, oh, I wish I had a clone. Like I wish we had a clone of you, Nichi, because you do so much for
Oh, you're
horror
going to
and
make me
authors,
blush.
and well, I will make you blush.
Oh, I'm just going to have to like duck off screen for a second.
Oh, hi, Tim. Look at that. Yeah, more
Yes, everyone
Canadians.
popped in. We've got Andreas here. We've got Katie here.
Hi,
Tim
Katie.
here. Thank you guys so much for coming. We've got Jay, who's always a hoot, always makes me laugh. Oh my goodness. So if he says something and you're talking and I start laughing, it's not because I'm laughing at you, Lydia, I promise. It baffles me how anyone can keep track of all the new horror releases with so many books being self-published. I agree. Your videos, when you pop up those like new releases or what's coming, I grab out my piece of paper and I've got a booklet. This is going to sound ridiculous. I truly have a booklet of all the booktubers and people that I watch, and they've got their own separate list of books that they've recommended that I put on there. So I'll grab my Lydia paper and I'll start writing all the stuff down that I didn't hear about yet. And it's just amazing that you keep up with all of that. Absolutely.
I owe it a lot to what I do with the Horror Writers Association, and I wouldn't say it took years. It's still an ongoing thing where many self-published authors, because of years of stigma, decades of stigma, believe that they aren't in that group. Like they can't promote the same way, or they're not eligible to be on a list of new releases. And many who have gotten used to the idea that they're just as viable as any publisher. It's a very level playing field now, has been for a couple years, that they can just submit along with any other new release thing. They can contact the same places that other people promote new releases. They are eligible for BookBub deals. They're eligible definitely for Horror Writers Association membership, let alone using the new release form. And that's all on horror.org/new releases. So a lot of them show up there. And I don't even talk about every single book because I am a sucker for the visual eye candy of a classy cover. So I talk about the ones most of the time that really get me. So there's still new releases that I don't even get to talk about.
Well, and it's almost impossible because it's just this sea, this ocean of incredible authors, up and coming people that are just putting out their first stuff, indie, just small press. Like there's just an overabundance of this delicious goodness out there. So it's next to impossible to be able to feature everyone as much as we may want to. So videos like that really help, because even though you may not be able to review every single book you talk about, the fact that you're just showing them and getting their face out there in the world, in our corners of the internet, just means so much.
Mm-hmm. Kasha does a really good list too, usually each month.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't know where she finds them all either. Like I on the Typical Books patron podcast, I do a huge list of all the books I could find from scouring the web, from new release lists to just looking literally through Amazon and looking at everything that's coming out.
Yeah.
And deciding if it's horror or not. Which is
sometimes it's so hard. You look at what its category, what on Amazon is different than what it is on Goodreads, and it's just like, well, what is it? And sometimes the synopsis is so vague. You're like, I'm not sure where I would put this, but yeah, absolutely. I want to say hi to Dave that's come in here. Thank you for coming, Dave. Yeah, who invited Jay? Listen. So many books I add to the books of her horror TBR is on Amazon list. It's totally out of control. Yes, absolutely. My lists are out of control as well, Katie. It's unbelievable. But that's what we do as bookies, right? And you know what? Books never get old. They never go bad. They never expire. So you can read until the day you croak, I guess.
I see Julie here.
Yes, Mr.
Hello.
Mr. Morningstar. We got Julie here. Perfect. And we've caught up a drinking game wherever Nikki says delicious goodness. Listen, you're going to be drunk within the matter of 5 minutes.
More delicious goodness. I can make your list worse. I don't know if everyone else does it, but BookBub, if you sign up as a reader on BookBub and subscribe to their genre-specific newsletter, I get horror and true crime every single day. There's 5 or 6 books that are horror and true crime that people are promoting on BookBub. So it's like $1.99, sometimes free, sometimes $2.99 ebooks. And it makes it worse because I have so much books to read already. And then I've got all these awesome books on my Kindle. Yeah.
Yep. I've been bad the last few weeks because I get the email every single morning from BookBub. What's available for today? What can you pick up? I've actually just deleted the email for the last couple of weeks because I'm like, no, listen, if I sign in, I'm going to end up downloading at least 5, and I can't do it right now.
But if we end up on an island somewhere with our Kindles or our phones or iPads or whatever we read on, we'll have a zillion books to read. So I like that.
That's very true. That's very true. And it can go with you anywhere you want it to. Yeah, BookBub is great, but it's bad for my purse. Yeah, unless you find all the free ones or the real cheap ones. Okay, well, Tim and Jay have a drinking game here, Lydia. Let's talk about what you've got coming up, because you've got a few things in the works that are coming out, and I'm very excited for.
My gosh. Most recently, and my copy is upstairs right now, my husband's copy of We're Not Home. And then that book comes out, or is already out, and it is a travel horror anthology. And that was Cam Wolfe put that out. And it's very similar to the last year's anthology, Local Haunts, where I had a story in that as well that was edited and spearheaded by Regina St. Clair at Regina's Haunted Library. Very booktube centric hangouts here. But We're Not Home has a story, Last in a Long Line. And that is like, it was kind of it's a very different story for me because I decided I wanted to write, sorry, get comfy here. I wanted to write something a little more quiet with a little more dread. And I wanted to focus on the dread because I don't write extreme horror, though I read a lot. And I don't write quiet folk horror, though I read a lot, but it's somewhere in between sometimes. But I wanted to just not get visceral, not get gory, focus on dread, right? So it's a little different. So that is one of the most recent things. And the other one, I have a copy here somewhere.
We're surrounded in books. There's like piles on each side of us, behind the cameras.
And when I was grabbing books, I decided to grab some stuff that I'm reading. And then I was like, oh yeah, I better grab my own book too, huh? Pray Eve 3 is out now. And this is the hardcover version. So I'm pretty stoked on the hardcover versions. But it is a collection of short stories. It's a slim volume, just like Pray Eve 1 and 2. And it came out on the 21st of October. And I'm not very good at promoting myself. So it's not that I neglected to mention it, but there's other stuff to talk about, right? And I had podcasts coming out, and I recently interviewed Nicole Wilson, who wrote Tide Pool, my favorite book of the year. And so that was more interesting to me to focus on. But I do have a new book out, Pray Eve 3.
Okay, well, I got to go get my hands on a copy then because I loved 1 and 2 so much. We were talking a bit about that before we jumped on backstage. And that's what I was saying, is that she's so humble, she's so modest, that I watched her channel for quite a bit of time before I knew that she was an author herself. And I was just thinking, girl, I didn't know this. I want to go pick up your work. And when I did, well, I shouldn't say when I did, because you were so kind and you contributed to my Canadian horror giveaway. And then you also sent me copies of everything as well. And I dove in right away. And I also checked out the audiobooks as well. And they were really well done as well.
D. Michael Pope did a really good job.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Like, yes, I really loved his contributions to the stories, and it's always kind of awkward. I've gotten very used to it, luckily, being an author that has had her work read by other people a lot. But it is awkward when you're handing off your baby, so to speak. And there's only like maybe one word where I'm like, oh, I would have pronounced it this way. But otherwise, he did a bang on job. Like, yeah, I'm very proud of those. Very proud. I'm equally proud every time one of my stories ends up on the Wicked Library, regardless of who reads it. He's had some amazing narrators, but for the most part, Nelson W. Piles has narrated my stories. I believe he's done the bulk of them, but it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It really brings the story to life and brings it off the page, having somebody read it to you. And I had to check it out. Whenever I find out that there's an audiobook out there, I will often, go and purchase every copy of the book I can. I'll get the e-copy, I'll get the physical copy, and I'll make sure I get the audio copy as well.
Yeah, it's an illness. I mean, I liken it to Dracula. Yeah, I own Dracula in 2 different places as an ebook. I have audio copies of Dracula. I have several hardcover copies of Dracula. Yeah.
It's an addiction. It truly, truly is. But it's not a bad addiction. So, I mean, I can justify it. Absolutely. Dave says he's also got the Chirp email every day for audiobooks. I've got that too. However, they don't necessarily send out audiobooks that are like my interest. So thank goodness it doesn't pull me in as much. Brad says I'm not allowed to apologize because he's watching me. You were currently watching 2 Canadians, so there's a good chance you're going to get a lot of sorries, and that's just the way it is. A show of apologies. Yes, exactly, Jay. Yes, the hardcover was really good.
Thanks. It was a beta project with Amazon KDP, and I've had my books on Amazon for quite some time. After Night Phase was traditionally published, then several years after, when the rights lapsed, I had them reverted, and I've self-published it there as well. But and the first Pray Eve was published elsewhere as well. But then when that reverted, I self-published it. And so having been on KDP for so long, when the beta for hardcovers launched,
Mm-hmm.
I was one of the tester people, and I loved it. I can't wait until it stops saying beta on it. Like, I don't know why it does, because I can promote them, people can buy them. Why is it in beta? Whatever. But they are doing a really good job. I think it was Chad Lutsky had pointed out how these KDP books don't have that book smell. And it smells kind of like hay and oatmeal, little milk, no
Oh,
brown sugar. Yeah.
oh. Well,
if you're interested in how it smells.
yeah, I'm glad that I'm not the only person that's a book sniffer and it really dives in there. And I love those hardcovers that don't have like the slip on them, and just the naked body itself is so gorgeous that.
Yeah. They've done really good. There's a harder cardstock in these first pages, and the inside pages are a little thicker than I even suspected. So it's just very good quality. So I just love it. And I do all the design. I've rejigged the front cover of upcoming hardcovers. This was one of the first printed, and it's a little oversized for me, so I brought that down. But I do all the pagination and layout because I come from a graphic design and news design background. So I have all these like Photoshop and all that stuff and training in it. So I did all that stuff. And I do the photography for the front covers of all the books too. Not Night Face. I designed it, but that's a stock.
This one.
Yeah.
Which is also gorgeous. The simplicity, and just it still gives you that eerie feeling, but yet it's very inviting. And the sun decided that it was gonna like absolutely like molest me over here. My goodness, it's
I have some fun
bright.
Night Face. If I don't destroy my bookshelves in the process of doing this, because everything's stacked up tight here. The original cover for Night Face was this.
Oh.
Very different. That was from the Postmortem Press, who had originally published it.
Yeah.
There's a little picture of me on the back cover. Very different feel.
Yes, from this one here. I'll hold up this one.
Yeah. And then there was another one. I don't know if I have it here in this mess. Oh, it's in a different stack. I have a big box in my closet with old Night Faces. There's one with a bleeding lemon on the front, which works into the story. And there's another one with just the constellation on the cover, and then the new one.
That is intriguing. I like that there's different colors or covers out there. We've got Josh that's popped in here. Tim says, multi-talented. I agree. I didn't know so many things about you. What is going on with the sun here? I'm sorry, guys. I've become a ghost here. Completely washed out. James, thanks for coming in. What got you into writing? Was it always just there? Did you always want to be an author, or did it come over time?
I think it was the illness of Stephen King. It was the same thing as a lot of authors of my age. You started reading about specifically Stephen King. It's not necessarily his grand skill that made me go, oh, I want to do this too. It was him writing about writers, his whole very write what you know thing, where he writes about a lot of writers, and he represents a writer's life in the darker bent of it all a lot of the time, unfortunately. But it was still intriguing, and it was like, yeah, I want to ramble around I-95, staying in hotels, writing about stuff and getting into hijinks and being haunted or whatever. And that really spoke to me as a kid. And there weren't any writers in the family. There were printmakers and pressmen and designers and musicians in the family, but it was yet another facet of art. The first thing I ever recall writing, like really sitting down, burning the midnight oil and writing, was in grade 3. I wrote some Care Bear fanfic about Professor Coldheart.
Ooh.
And it was read in front of the class. And then those teachers spoke with other teachers and said, we need a creative writing extracurricular class for kids like this. So I did that, and I wrote a werewolf story then too. And it just sort of snowballed from there. It's just always sort of been a part of my life. I was read to and started reading at a very young age, and just words, stories, horror specifically have just been ingrained in me so long. And I wrote a lot of stories when I was young, but I didn't retain any of them and they were all garbage. So, but yeah, then I started writing in earnest. I wrote some poetry in high school, like every good goth girl must. And then I started writing stories again in later high school and college.
So what do you think it is about horror that really sunk its teeth into you?
I'd say, do I have the book down here? No, I don't. It's upstairs. My grandmother and my mother read a lot of horror to us as when I was young. Edgar Allan Poe. And my grandmother had a gorgeous Edgar Allan Poe book that's illustrated that I pored over as a kid before I could even understand half of what it meant and like the real meanings behind stories. And my mother used to read us The Highwayman by Alfred Noyes, which is a great ghost story. It's a ghost love story, very dark, stormy night kind of stuff. And she would read it with a lot of bravado. My father would read us Grimm's fairy tale, and he knew a lot of different versions of, say, Hansel and Gretel. And he wouldn't read them, he would just tell them. But he knew so many different versions that we could never tell what version he was going to tell, and he'd mix and match them. And sometimes the wolf would end up with a rocks in its belly, and sometimes the wolf the witch rather, because he read us a lot of other Grimm stuff, and Hans Christian Andersen stuff. But sometimes the finger bone technique, where the witch is measuring Hans's finger bone all the time to see if he's fattened up. Sometimes they'd be rescued by their father. Sometimes they take over the house themselves and live there forever. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So your family's always been really close to horror. It's always kind of been ingrained since young.
Yeah. A lot of Shirley Jackson, Alfred Hitchcock, Ellery Queen on the shelves at my grandmother's, and Stephen King, of course, and Dean Koontz later on. My mom was a huge horror reader, though, and so was my uncle, who was a huge reader, and we'd always trade books among one another, even when I was way too young to read Stephen King.
Yeah. That seems to be an ongoing theme with most people. I was way too young to watch that movie or way too young to read that book, but I was already there. My parents were okay with it. Makes me think that maybe I should let my kids just, here you go. Dive in.
If they see it on the shelves and it's intriguing to them, like so many people note Pet Sematary as the first Stephen King they read. And it's the cat on the cover. Church looks enticing and interesting and scary to kids. And that was one of the first Stephen Kings I read as well. I think it was grade 5 or 6. And the teachers called my mom and were like, "Did you know that she's reading Stephen King?" And my mom said, "Yeah, it's my book. She's been begging me to read it for a while. It's fine." But yeah, it's all about like if they're interested, right? And what interests them. See a lot of these viral videos right now of little tiny kids that love Michael Myers. That is so very much me. I would have been like that,
Absolutely. I've been watching those videos. My youngest is actually obsessed with Ghostface. So much so that he wanted to go as Ghostface for Halloween. And I was like, sure, absolutely. So he had a ninja costume, but the top, his mask was Ghostface. So he was Ghostface in a ninja costume. It was hilarious. But I mean, if that's what they're interested in, right? You want to support and, kind of go with it.
Yeah. And there's a lot more of a broader landscape now for kids for horror. Like when I was very young, there was no Goosebumps. Like
No.
I'm 45, so that was like forever ago. There was no such thing. There's no R.L. Stine. There was no point horror. There was none of that. There was maybe some Nancy Drew, which was the closest to horror, and then Stephen King. So you had nothing in between, really. There was like scary stories to tell rotten kids and scary stories to tell in the dark. Those sorts of things came a little later from Scholastic, but there was nothing. And now there is horror
so
for
much
kids.
Absolutely.
And
so much. I mean, we talk about Fright Vision in our house all the time, and it's become like a favorite for kids, and it is like a Goosebumps type feel, spooky middle grade reads. So there's so many options out there. I'm just going to catch up here on the comments. Dave says, Care Bear fanfic, love it. Jay says, I used to write, is that supposed to be Smurf stories, but horror in school? And the teachers called my parents. Oh, geez.
Oh. Yeah, they can be pretty horrific. It's that when the purple one is biting each other's tails in the Smurfs,
Yeah.
that would have fed a lot of like creative horror, Smurf horror.
Teacher, I could just imagine you guys having your teachers call home and be like, listen, we need to talk about this. Mr. Morningstar, I'm half Canadian, so we'll just stop at that. We won't do the whole story. No worries. Thank you for coming. Dig the mug. Thank you. It's Spirit Halloween, of course.
Ooh.
Parents sound so cool. I agree. I would have loved to grow up in that household.
They super were. They were somewhere in between hippie and yuppie at the time when I was young, and we didn't have a lot, but we had a lot of books.
It's a lot of good sounding books too, it sounds like. James read Carrie at 7. Sorry.
Oh wow. See, yeah, 7 is young. That's a tough one, especially with the all the menstruation talk.
That's true. I guess it would be a good way to learn, that's for sure, or make you ask questions later on. The Hans Christian. The fairy tales are something really special. Did you ever write a story inspired by one of his favorite fairy tales? That's a question from Andreas.
I think a lot of them do indirectly influence almost all of my writing in one way or another. But I did write The Ghost of Rumpelstiltskin. It was a poetic experiment. And I did sort of an animation and a kinetic text version of it on my channel, and no one really watched it, but I'm very proud of it. Yeah, that was probably one of my more favorite. The Little Match Girl sticks out to me as one of the most sorrowful ones, and it's the sorrowful angles in stories that definitely stick with me. The one of the giant, the selfish giant, I think, is another that those sorts of things really stuck with me. So there's threads of it, but I don't think I've directly written something. And I don't remember right now if Rumpelstiltskin is Grimm or Hans Christian Andersen.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. The Little Match Girl, though, that definitely sticks out.
James says, I didn't understand all of it, but the story Carrie reminded him of X-Men. So
yeah, she's definitely got like some Jean Grey going on.
Yeah, yes, absolutely, she does. Now I'm going to be thinking about that.
And just even the story of Rogue, the way that Rogue discovers her powers, and that, you know, ostracization, the fear, all those things, they're so present in Carrie. So it's like a superhero origin story.
That's a lot to think about. I love that. I never even thought of that, James. Well, that's something to take in for sure. Now I'm going to have to go back and read Carrie and really compare the two for sure. Do you have an absolute favorite book of yours? Or is it too hard to pick?
Tough. The Shining is really close and dear to my heart. The Shining was another young read, and I've reread it. My husband picked me up a gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous hardcover version of it. It's illustrated, so I read that over and over and over. So the Pet Sematary and The Shining are really, super important. Another one that really stuck with me, probably because I read it in a total fever dream, was People Live Still in Cashtown Corners by Tony Burgess, Canadian author, and I highly recommend that. Oh my gosh, it's hard hitting.
I agree. Pet Sematary and The Shining are my two favorite books by King so far. I just recently read The Shining for the first time, actually. And I was just like, hey, it topped the cake over Pet Sematary for me. So, and I thought that wasn't going to happen. So that's really exciting.
It's such a strange story because there's so many things going on in this hotel, and for the length of it and the dread of just like what's going on in the room or the presidential suite, and the subtle changes in his father's demeanor. Jack Torrance is depicted so brilliantly in the book. And I understand when people don't like the film because of the way that it's depicted or the shortcuts that they had to take and changing like then axe for the Roquet mallet and stuff like that. I get it. I love the movie. I love, 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 love the movie. But to me, they're sort of different things, different worlds, different levels of fear going on in there.
Absolutely. Isn't The Shining one of King's least favorite adaptations of his books? I thought I had read that somewhere.
It was, yeah, it was. And it's the same things that fans would complain about. But the number one, from what I understand, was the depiction of Jack Torrance was really what did it. But I don't know. He has every right to have whatever opinion he wants, and opinions can change over time too, right? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But Jack Nicholson did do an incredible job. I mean, he's very, very, very talented. Absolutely.
And that's another angle of the writer's life in the Stephen King book that is not that glamorous. Oh my gosh. But the idea of I'm going to work on this because of my failed career as a teacher. So I'm going to go to this secluded place, take this secluded job. I was like, oh, great. That is what writers do. That's what I should do. Take some demanding secluded job and write novels. It's NaNoWriMo right now, and I'm still not doing it. So whatever.
No, are you planning on doing NaNoWriMo or just?
I wish I could every year. Every year I wish I could. I just don't have the stick-to-itiveness. I'm a little bit of a workaholic and I have a little bit of attention deficit. So it's hard for me to focus on one thing like that. But if there was a place in time where I could take the time to honestly devote myself to doing it, I would. And I'm pretty confident that I would produce a novel in the time without too much blood, sweat, and tears. But I'm just in awe of everyone else that does.
Absolutely. Yes, James, it was about time. I was waiting because I know Jay's doing like a read through of King's works throughout this year, you know, a different book each month. And The Shining had been staring at me for a really long time, for years. And so finally I picked up a copy, and then I knew that Jay was doing this King read through. And so I was trying to hold off until The Shining popped up on their list, and I couldn't. I had to, so the other month I read it. So it was absolutely about time. Hi, Priscilla. Thank you so much for coming.
Hello. Good morning.
You're doing NaNoWriMo, a pared down version, yeah, taking it a little bit easy. For those of us that may not, or anybody that's in the chat or that comes by later that may not know exactly what NaNoWriMo is, do you want to explain it a little bit more on what it's there for and how it helps authors?
Yeah, National Novel Writing Month. And you can do it in any way, shape, or form from the NaNoWriMo. I love that idea, Priscilla, because even getting a short story out, but you're supposed to hunker down in November and write a novel. You're not really supposed to have much more than a brief summary synopsis or whatever, point form notes if you're a plotter, stuff like that paired out. But you like start writing in the beginning of November and you finish a novel of however you define novel length. I think it has to be over 30,000 words. I'm not exactly sure on that, but you can just do it, sitting at home by yourself and engage not with any human being during the time. Or you can join reading sprints. You can go and actually sit live in human meet space and write along with other writers. You can have accountability meetups. It's 50K. Okay, thanks, Priscilla. Yeah. Which is like 10K under what is often traditionally defined as a novel. But that number is so elastic and has been shrinking, I find, over the last few years. For a long time, they wanted 100,000 words was like what readers wanted. I don't think we want that anymore in this like shorter attention span day and age. But you can engage in accountability hangouts every week. You can buddy up with other writers. I've known writers that have wrote in teams over NaNoWriMo to produce a book. Alice Hart's Welsh Zombies is one of those books that come to mind. And I don't remember the author's name, but they're Ottawa local. So that's how I knew about them. And they will write the bulk of it, but then you can polish it afterward. And a lot of those books become things that go into Pit Dark, which is a Twitter endeavor where you can pitch your finished work to agents and other publishers, or Pitch Wars, which is going on, I think, right now. Another Twitter endeavor where you can pitch your stuff to agents, which is super cool. But yeah, it's National Novel Writing Month is what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting because not being a writer or an author on my side, I get to watch everyone get excited for it, put up their posts, give their updates on where they're at, where they're sitting with, and I think it's just incredible. And sometimes I think that readers, we need to create something like that too for read as many books as you can in a month, get as many reviews out as you can in a month.
National Novel Reading Month, NaNoWriMo. It's still the same thing, right? Like, it's still the same. Right now, it's Nonfiction November as far as booktube fun goes, and the two just don't really mesh because everyone's out writing novels, right? Right now, and we're all reading, or so like apparently reading nonfiction, so it's like unfair in a way. But to read last year's NaNoWriMo proceeds, like the things that were written last year perhaps, or to read a National Novel Writing Month thing, like Tide Pool by Nicole Wilson was originally a National Novel Writing Month endeavor. So yeah, I thought that was super cool. And her and Kelso Hurtado, which is what I'm reading right now, I just want to show it off because I love it so much. The Ghost Tracks by Kelso Hurtado. It's I'm almost finished it and I'm loving every minute of it. It's on the recommended reading list for 2021 for Bram Stoker Awards. So Tide Pool and The Ghost Tracks have been like my favorite books so far this year, and I'm just super proud of them. I'll just keep mentioning Tide Pool all the time.
Well, then it's going to have to go on the list. So I'll have to pull out my Lydia list, my typical books list, and write it down on there. Yeah, I agree with this comment here. And I find that, well, now, especially horror, it's a lot of novellas or short story collections that you're seeing. And they seem to be easily consumed by readers, or horror readers seem to really love that shorter fiction. I love a beast of a book if I have the time to sit down and really take the time to consume it. These short story collections or these novellas are great for when you need that quick, I need to get something in, or I want to get something in, what am I going to read? And you can have it done very, very quickly. But I do love one of those big beasts to jump in and to really take your time with. However, Lydia knows as much as everybody else here that that's really hard to do, to pick up, a big beast of a book and to read through it when you've got so much on your list that you have to get to, on top of everything else.
Yeah, and like my writing definitely suffers for reading, and I don't mind. I think that's one of the bigger things with like writing. Sitting down and doing writing is a decision. You decided to write, and you can't like lament writer's block, and you can't lament your time constraints because you just have to decide to write. A lot of times I decide to read, unfortunately. Fortunately for like other writers, because I read their stuff, but I love reading. I like writing, but I love reading, right? So when I'm reading a big chunky book, it's got to move to keep me engaged. And sometimes I'll stop reading to write because I would rather do that. And with a bigger book, there's more of a chance to do that. I read Mina's Child, or sorry, not Mina's Child. Dracula's Child. Is it Dracula's Child? J.S. Barnes' Dracula's Child. It's massive. Okay. It's a huge book. But I read it within 4 days or something, because it was, and it's not an action-packed thrill ride by any means. It's a Dracula book, for crying out loud. But it moved, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I'm reading Harvest Home right now, and it's been almost 2 weeks, and it's just slow, and it's a beautiful book, and I'm loving it. It's just slow. So in between reading Harvest Home, I've read a short story collection, a novella, and I read The Halloween Tree, which is like a kid's book novella.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've also almost read all of the Ghost Tracks by Kelso Hurtado. All the while, I'm still reading Harvest Home. When I read Mina's Child, though, or not Mina's Child, I keep saying that. That's a different awesome book, but Dracula's Child, I didn't read anything else. I just devoured that, right? So that happens with big books. It's tough for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And it depends on the time of the year too. I find it's almost like the end of November into December, a lot of readers, including myself, kind of hit this wall where it's hard to get through anything. Even if you absolutely love what you're reading, it's hard to get through it because, your brain's exhausted of reading however many books you have throughout the year. And it's kind of like that moment of rest before you cross into the next year and you start your whole new reading goal or plans that you've got for the upcoming year. Personally, and I'm still kicking myself in the butt, I have been not in a reading slump. I don't want to say a reading slump because I'm still reading and I'm still enjoying what I'm reading, but it will take me like 2 weeks to finish a 350-page book. And that's very unusual. Usually a day or two to get through something like that, and it's good. But I find that, I'll go for a few days in between without reading, and I'll just let my brain just completely shut off when I would normally be, consuming what I've got on my list. But kick myself in the butt because it's not the thing to do when you've got a really long reviewing list. But sometimes it's our brain saying, you just need to own it in a little bit and take a step, take a breath in between things. But this is the time of year where I really want to read, but I'm kind of hitting that wall.
No, and I find that's where extreme horror really
Mm-hmm.
works for me because I can read
Okay.
these like longer books that take a little more focus and you're getting lost in a world, and no better cleanse palette than grabbing a novella that is like balls out insanity and
Yes.
visceral insanity all over.
What the hell
And
did I just read?
yeah, and it helps sort of like kickstart that reading
Mm-hmm.
thing. I've got a few of those lined up for once I've done some of these larger books that I'm reading. And what's funny with Ghost Tracks and Harvest Home, they're the same size. When I stack the books up, they're the same thickness, they're the same size, but the size of the print inside
The
makes all the
font.
difference.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so if you're like kind of tricked into a book that looks like, this doesn't look like it's going to be a slog. It looks like a normal sized book, like you're like, oh, I can read that in about 4 days. And I can once you look in it, but if you don't get to see inside of it and the print is like minuscular and it's like all packed in super tight and it's like 1,000 words per page.
Yes.
Ugh, yeah.
And
Please.
thanks a lot for that, as you get older, especially if you read a lot at night. That doesn't help when you've got the little tiny, tiny font. This is where the e-readers really come into place for me. If I pick up a book because I want to
Big
have a
time.
physical copy and the font
Mhm.
is small, what do? You go and buy the e-copy because then you can fiddle with the size of the font.
I love that. And like, even though I've just recently purchased a prescription set of reading glasses, they are so cute.
They
I
look
love them.
so good on you.
And they're mostly anti-glare, so I can actually wear them on my show. When I do the new books videos on Typical Books, I don't know, I cut it out most of the time, but even though I've got them on my iPad and I can adjust the size of the text that I've written, that is like I have full control over the size of it. I'm still like, what does that say? So I've got reading glasses now. So when I'm doing those videos, I won't be like, I won't have
You
the
look like
headache
a
after.
sexy dark librarian over there with those glasses. I love them.
I I wanted a little Shirley Jackson vibe, but not as
Yes.
much of a Shirley Jackson vibe because no one can really do that properly, As well as some
No.
burlesque girls I know can do it properly, but yeah.
I've started reading the Yours Cruelly,
Oh,
Elvira.
nice.
And I'm
Yeah.
thinking nobody could do what she did either, right?
No.
And some of I didn't know so much of what she's talking about, like the step into how she got that position and what kind of went down. And I'm admiring just how much happens that we don't know about, behind the scenes of how she got there. And yeah, she's another icon, absolutely. I'm just gonna catch up here. Sorry. Holiday season is murder. Yes, I do. I think that's what it is. Just kind of like I gotta slow it down, take a deep breath. That's a good idea too. I'm glad that you guys are sharing these because that's what I was going to ask you, Lydia. Like, how do you get back into the momentum of reading if you kind of hit that I don't like, we need to come up with a different word than a slump, because to me a slump is like when you're not reading at all. But
Yeah. It's like reader's block.
yeah, and you can look at the book and it's there and you're really enjoying it and you want to pick it up. But then you pick it up and it's, oh, I wonder what's happening on Instagram. Oh, I wonder who's put up a new video. Oh, I didn't do the dishes. I got to go and do those first before I. It's one of those moments.
You can't even really blame the book either, because there's times when I've not felt like reading a certain thing and I pick it up at a later date and I'm absolutely in love with it, right? So it really depends on so many other factors. Pardon me. I read nonfiction. That's like, I don't read a lot of other. Oh, thanks, James. I'm getting comfortable with the glasses. They're so new. But I don't read a lot of other genres. I occasionally read fantasy, very occasionally, usually classics too, or a little bit of sci-fi, not a lot. I'm a big William Gibson fan, but there's only so much William Gibson in the world. And then nonfiction, true crime. That's really that cleanse palette. Or nonfiction that has to do with writing horror, like books by Tim Wagner. And there's It's Alive, Where Nightmares Come From. I'm trying to remember. Joe Meinhardt and other people are involved in that. And they're all essays by other horror authors. Or I've been reading for about a year now. I've been reading Providence After Dark by T.E.D. Klein, which is a collection of some interviews and essays on Lovecraft. And so whenever I'm in have reader's block or in a writing slump,
I like this one, reading funk.
It is like a reading funk. Yeah. Pardon me. It's better than a block or a slump, because it doesn't really convey necessarily, because it makes you believe, like with the word slump, that you've got this like lackadaisical kind of like apathy towards reading, which isn't really true.
Exactly. It's just, you can love what you're reading. It can be staring at you. You can have that want to pick it up. It just doesn't happen. It's like everything in the world is a distraction. Or we come up with these excuses of why we can't read it. But yeah, no, absolutely. I need to kick it. I've even also thought of like setting a timer, like once the kids have gone to bed, sit down and set an hour timer and flip my phone over so there's no distractions and read until that timer goes off. So at least, if I don't get much in, at least I know that I was sitting and reading and dedicating an hour to that time. But then, of course, you've got that whole thing, mindset in the back of where is it? Like, am I 5 minutes in? Do I still have a half an hour left? And you're constantly looking at the timer. Oh, man, too funny.
It's like the same tactics as for writing or reading. Like the Pomodoro technique is that 15-minute timer technique, and then you take a 10-minute break and then back at it. Like you can do that with reading as well. And so many productivity people that read a lot read like a half hour every single day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Go and read a chapter and then get up and go do something else. Come back, read a chapter, go do something else. Absolutely. No, that's a really good idea as well. Some extreme horror lacks good writing. But Cows got me out of a long reading slump because it was a perfect balance of exquisite writing and batshit crazy character arcs. Well, another one to put on the list because, yeah, that's true. Some extreme horror does lack good writing, or at least you feel like you're losing something or missing something. But the extreme, I love that, batshit crazy is exactly what you're looking for.
Cows is on my list, and so is, I'm going to have some fun. I've got a couple twofers coming up, I guess. I guess Toonie doesn't really ring with everyone else outside of Canada, but like twofer, where I'm going to talk about Ed Lorne's Come and Cece Adams' Seaman. And neither of them are necessarily extreme. There's some extreme ideas in Ed Lorne's novella. And I think that for some people, just the excretions themselves lend them. It's a squicky thing, right? So and they're two very, very different novellas about the same sort of emission. And
Yes.
so that's like one fun, not quite as extreme stuff. But then the next one's going to be Rex Miller's Slob, which was a Bram Stoker Award winner from way back, and
Yes.
The Slob by Aaron Beauregard, which is like ultra extreme from what I understand. So I'll be pitting those two, not against one another, but together, like salt and pepper
I love
in
that.
my reading.
Not comparing
Yeah,
them,
and
just
it'll be
talking about
fun.
them.
Cows is coming up. I have an version of Cows. So yeah, there's some more extreme stuff on the horizon. And it definitely does like hard reset on your reading preferences for some reason. It just like flushes your reading brain.
Well, then I'm gonna have to go and give that a try because that would be perfect. And I don't want to necessarily call it like a palate cleanser because it's not like an easy, fluffy read to get through. I don't know. I had this one author on here, Wayne, who called them the jelly bean reads. You know, any of those
Oh.
reads that kind of just are delicious and easily consumed. Are you guys still playing that drinking game over there?
Yeah, delicious goodness.
Delicious goodness. It's something that is easily read in a short amount of time and just kind of gets that pumping going and gets that start with, you know, picking up stuff. Well, then those
Yeah,
are
I
going to have
think
to go on the list.
Love It or Hate It, the Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke novella did that for a lot of
Yes.
people. And
Yes.
I can understand why it's such a hit in that way, because it is a jelly bean read to a certain
Mm-hmm.
extent, although it offers a lot to think about. Depending on what angle of it that stuck with you, there's going to be something that sticks with you with that particular novella. But it is just a quick, digestible, super quick. You know, you can
Mm-hmm.
read it in an hour if you're
Oh,
dedicated and
yeah.
try hard enough and believe in
Absolutely.
yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it is a great definition of a jelly bean read. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that term. I have to try to remember to use it more because it's not a palate cleanser. It's a jelly bean read. Something that's easily.
It's tough though, because you could think of it as popcorn horror, where people think of it
Ooh,
as highly digestible,
yes.
you know, that sort of stuff. But I mean, things have gotten worse since we last spoke, and even more so, a lot more extreme horror novellas that are very short, very digestible, well written. So they just sort of roll off the mental tongue, and it's just comfortable to read and quick. They're not to be likened with jelly beans or popcorn because they are not sweet, they are not yummy, they are not digestible.
No, it's very true. It's very true. I really liked that novella by Eric LaRocca, but I also was comparing it to his other work that I had read, and I was doing a lot more diving into like the underlining message and stories that were kind of happening within Things Have Gotten Worse. And I think I might have like went in, like my own brain went in too far into it and
Mhm.
really wrapped my mind around it. And anyways, so when I've come across people that didn't enjoy it very much, I understand 100% the reason for not enjoying it very much. But I'm like, but what about this? What about? And I'm thinking,
Oh, Nikki got torn away from us unceremoniously in the middle of a very important thing she was saying. Oh my God. I am on the fence with Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, because it's like there's things about it I didn't like. And it
mm-hmm,
seems so petty, but the biggest thing where I was like, it was sold to me by TikTokers or whatever as a book. It's not a book. Then
no,
once I understood it was a novella, it's like, oh, okay, it's a novella. It's not. It's a short story. Like it's
mm-hmm,
honestly, quite honestly, a short story. So I went into it already feeling like ripped off a little bit in that extent. And then there were a few other things that really stuck in my craw, as the old people say, or jammed my gears, or whatever people say. But that said, like, it is well written and it is fun
mm-hmm.
to read. So I had
And it
fun reading
is,
it, and that's the important part.
and it does go
And it made me
batshit
think.
crazy. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not as visceral as I had understood. And the way people reacted to it, I was like, okay, I guess this is for me a jelly bean read.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, I really liked it. And I like when there's people that have that different, thoughts or opinions on a book and they can share that. Um,
Hmm.
I saw Eric's writing from like Starving Ghosts in every thread. It was insanely dark and poetic, and just the words that he used to describe everything was just, it was beautiful. And so I took that, and then his writing style and Things Have Gotten Worse, and I really enjoyed that. But then of course the batshit crazy, but then I was also like really like zoning in on the characters, the two. I'm trying to talk like in code just for anybody that hasn't read it. um the two characters, the two girls, I was seeing like the possession and like the control, and then I was also seeing like the sadness and sympathy and the insecurities on the other side that was letting the other person control. And I dived in deep in my brain to kind of pull out, the underlining message of things and how I was taking it. So how I took it was so much different than so many people that reviewed it. But that's what's nice about the community, is that we can all have different opinions, and you're not going to love everything you read. But
Hmm.
doesn't mean that other people won't. I don't know how, I say this all the time. I don't know how many times I'll go and read, negative reviews or see bad reviews. But the synopsis of the story still intrigues me, the whole
Oh yeah.
concept. Yeah. And I'll go pick it up and I'll absolutely love it when everyone else is, like, don't bother reading it. It's not worth it. And I'm like, you've just made me want to read it that much more, because reading is so subjective. So it's hard to tell
Hmm.
somebody not to read something because you don't know how they're going to enjoy it themselves, right?
I'm very intrigued in his writing because he's a fantastic writer, and he really painted in such a short real
Mm-hmm.
bit of real estate these people so very well that I'm excited for his other thing is out now.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got another book coming too. He's just cranking them out, which is
Full.
awesome.
It's his like debut full size like horror
Yeah.
novel, and yeah, I'm very excited for it. So, and he's gone, like, Eric's just like exploded in the community in such a short amount of time, and I'm just so happy for him. It's nice to see when stuff like that happens, and I'd like to see it for so many more authors that I just adore in the community.
He's on the recommended reading list for the Bram Stoker Award 2021 recommended reads so far.
Oh,
So yeah, he's going there, and even authors that are lauded with so much praise that I adore, Stephen Graham Jones. There's lots of Stephen Graham Jones I've read that I don't dig. It's not for
yes.
me, that other people just love, and those negative reviews, whether they're negative or just balanced and
Hmm.
fair, but not glowing, um, and honest. Like, that's the important part. You can read that when you're reading a review with a half a mind. You can tell whether it's just them slamming a book for no damn reason, or if
Hmm.
it just wasn't for them and they're expressing an opinion, or there were big mistakes, so to speak. Not that there's mistakes in writing, but like from a reader's point of view, things that were not handled properly or well or something. But you can read between that. But with extreme horror, it's those negative reviews that sell it for me, when they're like, "Oh my god, I can't
Yes.
believe this warped individual was
Yes.
allowed to write this mess of, you know, nuns becoming prostitutes." And I'm like, "Hell yeah, I'm there."
Oh, it's so true. Or like The Dead Inside. I don't know how many people have told me, don't read it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Don't read it, Nikki. It's gonna bother you, especially being a mom. But them telling me not to read it, I mean, you've already made me want to read it that much more.
Yeah.
So it's
The
always
minute I saw
lingering.
negative reviews on it, I had to read it. I loved it. So yeah, I knew I would.
Yes. Sometimes I'll look at the negative reviews, or, the less positive, I guess, and I'll read those first, or I'll check those out first, because, like you said, honest, well balanced, as long as they're being informative of why they didn't enjoy it, that really helps, because it helps me decide whether it's going to be something I'm going to enjoy.
Hmm.
James has never had a reading funk. Well, that's not fair. You're canceled,
And
James.
no, that could definitely be just the stick-to-itiveness if you're reading every day. And it's just, my mother read every day. I think she would probably agree with you. Every single
Yes.
day she picked up the book she was reading, and she never stopped reading a book, as far as I can recall.
I
Ever. She
admire
never
that.
DNF'd a book. Hmm.
I admire that, because sometimes by the end of the night, because the only time that I have to read is usually, other than audiobooks. Audiobooks are so easily read anywhere you go, because you can be cooking, cleaning. I can actually listen to them at work,
Mm-hmm.
commuting. I commute and I drive a lot. But to sit down with a book and physically read, I maybe get like 20 minutes a night once the kids are in bed. But then by then, sometimes you're just so physically exhausted to even try to
Yeah.
focus on what you're reading is impossible.
I
So I
can't
do.
do fiction audiobooks, unfortunately, unless they're short. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can listen to The Wicked Library, and I've listened to Dracula, The Hunchback of, or not The Hunchback, Phantom of the Opera.
Mm-hmm.
I've listened to a few classics in audiobook format, but for me, for audiobooks, it has to be nonfiction. I can listen to Malcolm Gladwell's books or biographies, autobiographies. I can listen to those, but for some reason, just a long form fiction reading, my mind starts to drift. But
Yeah, no, absolutely. Priscilla, I love Things Have Gotten Worse. Yes, I am right there with Priscilla. That's what I enjoy. Some people love it, some people don't. Things Have Gotten Worse was a one sitting read for me. Sadly, the film is discouraging some from reading the novel.
which is so
If
unfair, because if only they knew that they could just sit down and read it and it doesn't take long and they can take away from it a whole different thing than whatever the movie's going to do. Yeah,
Yeah, no,
that's unfair.
absolutely. I hope you're still here. If you are, thanks, Rob. Should be working. I do the same thing. Your secret is safe with us. We won't say anything. Oh, thinking of ending things. Yes.
Oh,
Although,
sorry. Yeah. I fell prey to
although
that. I haven't read it.
I know that there are some film adaptations in the works for Erica Rocca, so I'm sure there'll be something out there. Yes, the negative reviews of Dead Inside is what sold her. Yes, me too, because everyone's like, I can't tell you to read this. If you pick it up and you read it yourself, that's on you. I'm just like, well, now you just made me want to go and pick it up. I mean,
American Psycho. I was told to not ever read it and that it would scar me for life and it was horrible. And I was like, scarred for life, huh? Sounds good to me.
well, isn't that
Yeah.
funny? So, do you find that you get scared over anything, or does anything bother you? Or is it just,
Not really. And I think, because although I do have a very vivid imagination, I think the things that I read in fiction just don't permeate so much. I do think of things, the things do stick with me, but they don't scare me
mm-hmm.
necessarily. I think maybe because of being a kid and being read scary scenarios, and they never really scared me. I mean, as a kid, as an episode of Scooby Doo made me unnerved to go in the basement because it was dark. But like that's the closest to being scared that a fiction really did, you know? So nothing necessarily unnerves me too badly. And I've read a lot of very unnerving stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Zombie by Joyce Carol Oates, The Half Freaks by Nicole Cushing, and Dead Inside is another one, and People Live Still in Cashtown Corners. Those are all really about some very deplorable, damaged, scary people. And that's my favorite sort of fiction. Those all four of those books that other people would find very hard to read or unsettling, or they wonder about the author's frame of mind and their sanity. Those sorts of things are probably the most unsettling, that have stuck with me so much that I remember the titles and the authors' names, which
Yeah,
doesn't always
exactly.
stick with me. But and the characters have stuck with me quite vividly. I think that's the closest that I come to being scared or really unsettled, is supreme forever adoration. Warped.
No, and I get it, and I agree with you and James here. It's usually, I mean, it's funny how you get so desensitized when you read
Mm-hmm.
so much, gruesome things. I would agree that I think like the true crime or like the psychological things of things that can actually happen, and that there's actually people out there that have done this or that will do something like this. I think those are the ones that kind of make me sit back and think, okay, well, that's kind of terrifying because, and it could just be your, running your regular routine of a day, and you might cross paths with one of these people and you may be their targeted victim. That to me is probably the most scary thing. And again, that comes down to true crime as well. I quite enjoy even listening or watching true crime YouTube channels, and hearing some of the different cases that are out there and the situations. And that is absolutely terrifying, but at the same time, incredibly addicting, which is probably not a very good thing, but
No, and I get that too, because for a lot of true crime stuff, it's like you want to understand the perpetrator and the victimology, and you get that as a package. You get when true crime is presented properly and good.
yes.
You get a background of what it takes, or what has happened to a lot of people that are perpetrating crimes. Some of it unavoidable, some of it avoidable, and those sorts of things that you can have that ongoing Tetris game in your mind of what makes a killer.
Yeah.
And then with the victimology, it's the same sort of thing where there's so much unavoidable, so much lightning in a bottle. And there's also avoidable things or high risk behaviors, or just things that you can do as someone who is not in a high risk situation to minimize the risk of ever becoming in a situation, or how they handled it. I think like the least scary and least terrifying true crime story that I took so much from, and I think so many people can, with Dirty John. Have you ever listened to that podcast or watched the show about Dirty John?
I've seen parts of it. I haven't heard the podcast, although I've heard a lot about it and people have recommended it before.
I highly recommend, digest no more Dirty John and listen to the podcast from beginning to end. It's quite riveting. And the end game is, it's one of those stories where you can take a lot away from. And it also helps creatively too, because like with writing, you get to see how people react. And I'm a little bit of a person with a flat affect. I have very muted emotional response in my day-to-day life to things, unfortunately. So it's hard for me to like, sometimes one of my favorite writing books is called Characters, Emotion and Viewpoint, because those are things I just don't really have myself. So I need to like learn from other people, learn from other writers, learn from true crime. Especially if you're writing like horror, you can find a lot of those visceral reactions in people, like those emotions that come out, especially when you're dealing with the families of victims or victims themselves.
And so many people don't focus on the families or the people that are still around that have to mourn those people or think about what happens, or if they don't have answers and they're still fighting to get answers. A lot of times I'll sit back and think about that. I love that you say that about yourself, because I find that it brings your whole energy. I don't know, I was telling you backstage that it's very addicting, your setup, your energy, your voice, talking about, like voice acting or voice work. I mean, it's very calming, it's very gentle, but it can be very eerie. Like you can get the dark setting just perfect, which is why your channel is so addicting.
I should focus on it a little more. And that's, I think, why I like talking about true crime so much, because I know it doesn't necessarily faze me, but I also do have a heart deep down inside. It's tiny and it's black and charred, but I have one. So I'm not going to like say really visceral, upsetting, horrible things. And there is a respect for remaining victims or families or any friends of anybody, right? So, but I just have a calm delivery. I don't know why. Probably because of years of trauma, right? Like that sort of levels you out.
Oh no, I love that. I admire that, because I'm the type of person that's always, like that annoying, giggle, bubbly, especially in uncomfortable situations, right? So I would love to learn, or to be able to, take in your calming presence and learn how to do that. So that would be something I would strive to for sure.
It's just zen, I guess. I don't know. Growing up in the countryside, I like your personality is infectious, right? And for different reasons, but I find it just as infectious. So bubbly and giggling and laughing inappropriately works perfectly fine.
Exactly. In
Yeah.
a situation where you're talking about something really gruesome and you're sitting there giggling about it. That's
I
sounds like
often
me.
watch other shows, and I'm always like, I wish I could have a little more personality because I am kind of just like flatline Morticia Adams to a
Mm.
certain extent, but like I should be more entertaining, and I'm really not.
Well, no, I love it. And you are absolutely entertaining. Absolutely. If anyone here is not already listening to the podcast or watching her channel, you should absolutely be doing so. Um, but it's true, you know, you come onto somebody's channel and you're trying to get to know them, or you're trying to, it's YouTube's really hard because everyone's got different personalities, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around how I want to say this. Um, and everyone is always, oh, I have a girlfriend who does YouTube, and she's always being told that she needs to be bubbly and exciting and and I'm like, why? If that's not you, that's not you.
Mhm.
Be yourself. People will love and enjoy your channel because of who you are. um, but it's true, the people that usually do well in the community are the people that are really entertaining. And I don't necessarily have that either, right? There are people that do it really, really well. um, but I like the soft, calming, dark presence. I mean, yours or Merce's channel, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Or Sagewood, Elizabeth, oh my goodness. Just all of you guys are so calming, and it's just that, again, that dark setting, relaxed, welcoming, come into my lair. I promise I don't bite too hard type vibes that I love the most. So,
It's probably also because when we watch, if we watch any of those like how to do YouTube people,
yeah.
a lot of them are just like you turn it off because they're like, oh my God, their hands are in my face. What are they doing? They're screaming at me. Ah, get out of
Yeah.
here. I
Smash
mean,
that like button, smash that subscribe button. It's like, that is not me. I'm sorry.
I often want to make fun of those sorts of things. Yeah, smash that like button. I
Yes.
so badly want to make fun of it
You
sometimes
need
on my
to.
show.
You need
But
to.
I mean,
But you need
yeah.
to do it in like the dark way, to be like, smash that like button.
Stab that like button.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh
Stab that
man,
like
that's too
button.
funny. Well, we have passed the hour mark. Are you okay for time, or I don't want to take up
Yeah.
all of your precious time on.
Oh, no, I'm fine. Like I told my husband, who is actually in his recording studio right now,
Oh.
an hour, 2 hours, I don't know, somewhere in there. So I have no real plans other than hanging out. My dog's still sleeping, so that's good. He's not getting uppity or knocking over my camera. So yeah, I'm good.
Absolutely. I agree. I think your style is part of what makes your channel so atmospheric. Absolutely. And inviting. Go and hang out with Lydia on her channel, Typical Books.
The fun part is like I never run out of ideas in a way because like I don't have to come up with ideas either. It's like I've read a book and I want to talk about this facet of it, or I read these books and I just want to talk about that, or there's these new books coming out, or it's
Yeah.
easy. It's easy because it's easier when you just be yourself. I couldn't imagine being like a YouTuber that has to like come up with ideas and like
Hmm.
plan ideas and follow trends and all that stuff. Like, whoa.
Or if it's your full-time job. I mean, to me, booktube, you'll never be making the big bucks to be able to support your whole entire life off of
Yeah.
just YouTube. You need to be like a full-time, like high-end, entertaining, doing some crazy, wacky, or traveling or something like that. Um, but it's yeah, it's very true. There's lots of ideas. There's lots of things that you can do with it. Be yourself. Don't have
Mhm.
to be, extra just to bring people your way. And it's not about the numbers either for me. It's just about the fun. And like you said, talking about books, supporting the authors, sharing these things that I love, and having that people with the like-minded interests to be able to talk with. For that's what it is for me. What got you
Mhm.
into doing YouTube, or what made you think, I'm going to start a YouTube channel?
It was literally books and horror because I watched YouTube. I had a YouTube channel since 2006, and I like experimenting with electronics and electricity. I experiment with electricity. Experiment with technology. Thank you.
I was going to say, you're going to be
Uh,
like making your next Frankenstein monster over there.
yeah, Modern Prometheus with Lydia Peever.
Yes.
Yeah. Um But I like experimenting with gadgetry and technology and design, and all of those things sort of marry themselves with YouTube. So like ages and ages ago, I'd uploaded a couple videos of fun stuff, and it was ridiculous. And I gave no real attention to it. But then I began watching BookTube shows, and none of them talked about horror. The closest was Katie at Chapter Stacks, and she didn't do horror all the time, but she did do some horror. And she wasn't even one of the first booktubers. Of course, there were so many YA booktubers, and I liked a lot of their shows, and a lot of them were just like, I don't want to say no talent, because it's not about talent in entertainment. They were literally human beings in front of their bookshelves
Mm-hmm.
talking about books, and I loved that. I absolutely loved it. But they never talked about horror. None of them did. And
Nope.
then I was like, I want to be the horror booktuber I want to see in the world. So I started talking about books, but I couldn't help it because I just have a dark sense of humor, and I'm just maybe a sarcastic, horrible person. So I was like, this is a book. It has a cover and a spine. So it was a little bit of a parody, unintentional parody, but I didn't know what else to say about the book. I could talk about what it was about and what I thought of it and the characters and the writer and all those sorts of things, but also it's like, it's a typical book. And that's how that was born. It was ridiculousness. But then a few more other booktubers started doing horror, and horror specifically. And then over the years, I started taking it a little more seriously as well, and talking about more visceral books or more abrasive books or rarities and books that a lot of people hadn't read. And once in a while, dipping into more popular books. But I've never really covered like the brand new hot YA release, or all the Stephen King books and all the Kuntz books and books that people actually have read. Unlike our corner of horror booktube, where we're talking about like books that maybe 50 people have read in the first months that they're out, little books. But then it started growing, and there was more and more horror booktube, but I really enjoyed it. And I've been a photographer for years and years, so I've always had cameras and lights around. So I'm like, well, I might as well,
Do it.
and I was podcasting too. So I've got these like shit hot mics and stuff and all this stuff to make a better YouTube channel, instead of sitting down in front of my rickety flip phone trying to make a booktube channel. So then I started taking it more seriously. And at the same time, as I'm taking it more seriously, and there's more people looking for horror booktube on YouTube because it's now a thing, then more people were watching and interacting. And it was the
Mm-hmm.
interacting that I was like, I can also marry in that I'm doing the like curating the list of new releases for Horror Writers Association. And it gives yet another avenue for me to talk about really cool books that a lot of people haven't heard of. So it just all started with me having a YouTube channel in 2006 and wanting to experiment. And the best thing to experiment on is all the horror books I read,
Oh, I
and the
love
writing,
that.
and that I
I need
write
to get a
too.
better set up like you. That's what I need to do.
It is. It's a little much sometimes. My office looks like a normal office. I've got some super goth family portraits on one wall, and the books and a computer and a printer, like very normal office. Except that it is littered with lights and cameras and microphones and cords.
Because you have
Yeah.
the best of both worlds. You had your time for reading, writing, all the stuff that you got to do, your business, and then you're presenting and you're showing off and you're promoting and you're marketing.
It's fun too. Like I love the experimentation, and I love editing. I love playing with lights. Even as a photographer, I like doing like background stuff and setting up a scene and getting lights right, even though I'm not like that good at it. Especially because it takes a lot of time sometimes, and people don't want to devote the time to getting a scene just right. Still
Mm-hmm.
playing with my lights and still playing with the color balance, but it's fun. I think it's fun.
Absolutely. That's like the dream of any booktuber or any content creator, is to have an area where you can set up your perfect setup and just leave it and not have to come back and set it up every single time you sit down to do something.
That's why I've got the dedicated camera. I mean, I don't know. I'll take this down and I'll give it a little tour since we're all friends here.
Yeah.
more or
It's
less.
exciting.
There's a
Exclusive on Dark Between the Pages
dog.
channel.
I've got my mic on a stand right now in front of the books, but that's the mic I use for all my podcasting, although I'm upgrading to an XLR mic. And the messy desk where all the editing happens.
That's where the
That
magic
arm,
happens.
yeah, and that arm, that little boom arm is where I do all my overhead stuff. So whenever I do a top down, some plants, the other chair, a stand with a light on it, creepy family portraits, um, the the stand that this camera is on. There's my permanently set up camera right now, and it has another cord coming down to it to a mic that goes on that stand, and the mic is sitting over by that light there. And there's boxes of cameras and headphones for quick headphone action. And in the
I
closet,
love it.
I don't know how. Oh, we got some oops again.
Need you to have
In
that
the
shirt on.
closet. Yeah, like jingle shirt. In the closet, there's a box of stands, more stands, in case you need more stands. We always need more stands.
Always. Or they break or
And
something happens.
a backdrop with its stands and more lights. And I've got my camera set up here entirely. Sorry about this. Super professional.
It was an exclusive on my channel. We got a little sneak peek at all where the magic happens between writing, reading, filming.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your podcast. Yeah, no, that's exciting. I love it. I love your setup. Thank you, Savvy and RK. It's nice to see you guys pop in here.
It's all a part of having being interested in photography for so long, because I wouldn't have like so many stands and sets of lights. There's a whole other set of lights in there and like a big soft box and all sorts of stuff that I don't use at all, because I do rely on the window light for the most part, and these little pot lights that you saw kind of around, and the big LED light. I don't even turn that on all the time, but once I started trying to get consistent lighting, because the sun, you know how the sun ruined your day earlier?
Yeah.
I hate when the sun ruins my day.
Just going down now, and that's what I rely on, is like the natural light. And I tell you, I felt like I was molested like this whole entire live, because I was just like this washed out white ghost. Still a little
happens.
bit.
It happened to, oh my God, she just had a book out too. Kelly Martin. It just happened on her channel the other day too. She was like all white on one side. She still looked great and sounded great. Everything was great, but it's like the light, the sun, just.
Well, and sometimes the amount of time that you put in to film and do something, by the end of it, you're at war with yourself. Do you sit back and do you re-record everything you just did that came out just perfect the way you wanted it to, or you just deal with that, that one fluffy that's hanging out right there in the front of your hair that everyone can see? Or so you have to kind of take that and just take it as a win. We're all human. It happens.
Really bad for like, I'll brush my hair or whatever. I'm dressed for work like 99% of the time when I'm on my show. I'm just dressed for work, because I'll often film before work, and that's the best time because I'm ready for work. I've brushed my hair and I have clothes on or whatever, and I've done makeup, but I don't have a lot of time otherwise, right? And in the afternoon, I do get awfully sleepy, so I may not have like the best persona on camera, or just not feel like it, or not be able to talk in a straight line. I often stumble over my words, leave big gaps in what I'm saying while I collect my thoughts, and just not on in the afternoons at all, or evenings even worse, because I'm a quiet person in the evenings very much. So the mornings are always better. The light doesn't always cooperate. And I'll often like forget that, like I'll have my hair ready and brushed for the day, but then I'll go do something and then go to film and my hair is like, I don't know. That's why I rely on it just being brushed straight for the most part, because it's easy.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I hear you on the stumbling of words. That's the nice thing about videos. You can edit that stuff out. If you make a real dumb mistake, or if you're not making any sense, you can just clip, you're out, but when you do these live things, I make an ass of myself all the time. because I stumble over my words. I can't get at what I'm trying to say. I read. I promise you guys I read. And I'll pop up a comment on the screen and I can't even get out what I'm trying to read. And I just leave them raw the way they are. I don't take them down and then edit them and then put them back up. They're what you see is what you get because it's live, it's real, it's the people that are talking, and it shows people that I'm human too and I make mistakes. Yes, James, she does have a channel. Go and subscribe. Absolutely.
Yeah, typical books. Typical books. You can find me online too at typicalbooks.com. All of my web addresses lead to the same website, whether it's nightface.ca, lydiapeever.ca, typicalbooks.com, praylighteve.com, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
They all just go to the same website, so you can like get at it there.
Well, I'll make sure too, once we're off here, is I'll go and I'll put all of your socials and all your links and everything down below so people can find you nice and easy with the click of a button. I didn't have time to get that done before the live. I apologize, but I will do it right after we're done here. But
that's perfectly fine. It's more about like the hangout chit chat.
Yes, exactly. And it was really enjoyable to get to chat with you because not only do you have your job, podcasts, writing, you do your own YouTube channel, BookTubes, you promote other authors, you talk about their work. I mean, you are such a very incredibly inspiring and busy person in the community, and the amount that you support people on your channel, talk about other people's work, giving those authors the spotlight. It was nice to be able to chit chat with you, and as much as we got to talk about you and your work and to promote you a bit, it was just nice to be able to hang out and chat with you and get to know more about you and talk things that we both have knowledge about or that we both deal with when it comes to, content creating, that sort of thing. So it was a great chat.
And a studio tour. Oh my God.
That's how I'm gonna go and I'm gonna share this live after. We're gonna be like, listen, you guys have to watch all the way through because we got like exclusive on my channel, a studio tour.
and live dog action. Yeah, yes. I would be remiss. The one thing I don't ever do on my channel is music, of course. And I can never find music that fits because everything's just too uppity, or it's like, it all sounds very samey, just dark cello music. I love dark cello music, but it's all very samey and it never like goes with what I'm doing or saying. My husband has a music project called Anorax. And through Anorax and other music projects that he works on, he's doing some work with Feed Me Glass Records and Snuff Wagon. But other than that, Anorax is his band. And he had created all the synth soundtracks for everything I use. And I use his background music on TikTok and stuff like that for the most part too. Well, not all the time on TikTok, but sometimes. And so I definitely owe a great deal of that ambiance to my husband and the music that he creates.
Oh, well, that's exciting. Needs to get his music on YouTube.
No, and there is some through the service that he uses to publish all of his music. There is some on YouTube as well. We don't have videos. Like there is some like promotional videos that I help make. And he put out a good promotional video for the last album, Apathia Scale. So it is out there somewhat, but you can always check in the links below all my videos. And there's due credit to Anorax for the fantastic music that is that like sort of sound bad landscape.
Exactly what is needed. Yeah. No, I've seen some of the promotional videos that you have shared. And it's really good. I agree. Sometimes I'll try to put a song on because I'm thinking, just me staring at the camera talking is quite boring, but you put the song on it just doesn't fit with what you're talking about or the discussion, or it's too uppity, like you said. There's not enough of that dark, eerie, very atmospheric type music on YouTube to be able to use, and you have to have something that is licensed through them to be able to have it on your videos for sure.
Exactly, or that's long enough. Instead of just like looping a 3-minute song over and over for 12 minutes or whatever. Oh my God. So I was very lucky that I think it was 2 albums worth. One was a movie soundtrack for a movie that has not been published yet. I don't think the movie's out, or it might never come out, but my husband had done a score for a film. So I used that film score as the bed, and there's a stripped down synth only version of another album of his. So it really works well because it's got all those like high highs and guitar parts taken out, so it's just like creepy synth. It looks really good.
Oh, that sounds really good. I love that.
Yeah,
That's
the
a
music for there's like 2 albums worth, so 2 45-minute tracks that I have that is all creepy synth taken from what like his albums that he created for the Typical Books long form podcast. So if you really dig my voice, you can listen to almost 2 hours of it going on and on about books. But the bed for that is different than the one I use for my shows.
just gonna quickly. I'm gonna have to. I love podcasts because again, I can listen to them when I'm at work or when I'm commuting, that sort of thing. I'm at a battle with myself. Do I download and listen to a podcast episode, or do I download and listen to an audiobook and get some more reading in? So I try to balance out the two, but I'm really bad. I need to get more podcasts under my belt because there are some fantastic ones out there that I could just sit there and be entertained nonstop. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to have to check out more. That's a smack on my hand for not doing enough.
Or ones that straddle like the in between Wicked Library. You can definitely check out Wicked Library. Not just for me, there's all sorts of other really cool authors that are featured on that, like really cool authors. And their Halloween specials offer like almost micro fiction. So you can tune into those. And then, of course, horror book. Aside from Typical Books, the podcast, there's like This Is Horror is a very good podcast. Written in red if you're into more extreme stuff, and Books in the Freezer, because that was originally started between 2 booktubers.
Yes.
Yeah. And Rachel isn't on it anymore. Another Canadian booktuber who does horror specifically at Shades of Orange. She's not on it as much anymore, of course, but it's still...
Oh, Rachel's not on there as much?
No, but it's still as fantastic and relevant as ever. And she talks to a lot. I'm trying to remember her last name's Gagnon, but I can't remember her first name. Stephanie Gagnon. At That's What She Read. She talks to a lot of authors and stuff, so it's really cool that way. Max Booth from Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, although the author of We Need to Do Something that we were talking about earlier. He has a really cool podcast called Ghoulish, and he spoke with Eve Harms recently, which is maybe my favorite episode of Ghoulish so far. So yeah, there's a bunch.
So many there's the newer one by Thomas Gloom called Into the Gloom, which is really good, and he's got like a fantastic narrating voice. He's done Take Your Turn Teddy, he narrated, and then he just narrated his horror novella The Potted Plant that came out, and he's just got a voice that I could sit there and listen to forever, and he does a really good job.
I'm gonna tune in.
Yeah.
I kind of count, like Brad Proctor was here. I don't know if he's still here, but he's been doing Paper Cuts, of course, which I count sort of like as a podcast, even though like
with
you
Jay,
can watch it. You
can't leave out Jay. Poor Jay, the poor guy. He always gets forgotten. We love you, Jay.
Thank you for your show.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And there was another, of course, Jason from Jason's Weird Reads. He started podcasting. That's how I first first knew of Jason, is I listened to his podcast.
And now he started up another one.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's all sort of the same world
to consume. There's so much, and it's the same as reading. There's so many incredible podcasts. There's so many incredible YouTubers. It's hard to be able to support everyone. So you kind of bump around and try to dip your toes in anywhere you possibly can.
Oh, thank you. Yes. No, as you mentioned, Andreas, there is, I was in Dark Moon Digest, and the story, speaking of multimedia, the story in Pralide Eve 3 that is the oldest is a reprint from Dark Moon Digest 10. Laurie Michelle and Max Booth put out Dark Moon Digest, for those that don't know. But Dark Moon Digest is a really cool thing if you want to get some good short fiction regularly. I think it's quarterly. Crocodile Rot was in Dark Moon Digest 10, and it's also in Pralide Eve 3 as a reprint. And I also read it live. So if you go to typicalbooks.com or lydiapeever.ca and click on fiction, there's a version of Crocodile Rot there as well, and I read it live. It's maybe not the best because it's a very old recording now, but yeah, it's fun if you like audiobook stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna go and check that out. Absolutely. Well, that's exciting. Rob, you were too kind, saying that we're two of his favorite booktubers, and that he loves listening to your voice, watching your show, and listening to your podcast. It is a great way to commute to and from work. Absolutely, to consume things. Well, I don't want to take. We've crossed past the hour and a half mark. That's what I was saying.
Well, we can wrap it up with a little more making you blush with thank you for having me on your show. I mean, I love your lives. I love
I'll
your
hide.
channel entirely. Oh.
I'll hide behind the
But
book. Oh, you were too kind.
you do such a service for so many authors and readers, and getting to go beyond the pages into the dark between pages with authors. I just so flattered because I love watching you talk to authors. And when you get authors talking amongst one another, it's gold, pure gold.
I could just sit there and listen. They could be rambling off their laundry list, and I will just sit back. And it's kind of funny because sometimes I'll be sitting there in a group of authors, and I'll forget that I'm with them and that I'm on the camera, and I'll just sit back and I'll just start listening. And then that it kind of goes quiet, and I'm like, oh yeah, wait, excuse me, sorry, I gotta be a part of this. It means so much to me. I say time and time again that authors like yourself, you guys are my celebrities. I don't watch much TV. I don't watch many movies. So to get to talk to authors, especially, cherry on the top when they're a fellow Canadian. I love all my authors dearly, but a fellow Canadian, because we don't have enough Canadian authors, period. Not even in like the traditionally published form or even a small press or indie. So it's so nice to get to talk with a fellow Canadian who is so hardworking. You do so much. You are so supportive in the community. You're always talking about other people's work, books that are coming up. You're part of the HWA, your podcast, everything. It's something to admire for sure. Absolutely. And it's authors like you guys that really push me to want to be a part of this community, because there's so much to be able to learn and come across, and new authors that come daily, that are being inspired by you guys, chasing your dreams. So I don't know if I often say that I don't know if I can do YouTube anymore, but these lives I can do anytime, because I get to sit for a couple hours a day and just get to be able to soak in all this delicious goodness. There's another drink, take a shot.
Delicious goodness. Yes. No, it's true, because you are the OG as far as having cool, off the cuff, fun conversations with authors. It's not like a high pressure interview, very free form with engagement from audience, friends, readers, fellow booktubers, and fellow authors, like all of us here on the same sort of playing field. Like, yeah, a lot of other people are doing lives, but your lives are really precious.
Oh, you're gonna make me. That's it. I'm gonna go off camera.
OG Canadian.
Yeah, exactly. It's that Canadian thing. I'm telling you, Canadians gotta stick together. There's not enough of us out there in the world. That's too funny. Well, I thank you so much. Again, if anyone's got a quick question to pop in there that we missed, make sure you get it in. But before we go, Lydia, can you please again just remind people what you've got out there, what people can check out, what they should be getting their hands on? That there's Prelude Eve 3 that's out now.
Yeah, Prelude Eve 3, of course. I've got this giant stack of books that are not mine. Prelude Eve 3 is out, and it is a collection of my short stories. It goes along with Prelude Eve 1 and 2, which I don't have copies of handy. They're underneath a whole bunch of other books.
I should have had mine too, but yours are like strategically placed up there, and if I pulled them out again, it was going to make a mess on the shelves.
Exactly, and that's my problem. I should have pulled them out, but I was more concerned about having a coffee ready and a cup of water. Prelude Eve 1 is here, but yeah. Also, most recently, the collection, a horror anthology about travel from Cam Wolfe, and it's a Shades of Grimm first edition, because he's going to be doing them on a regular basis. We're Not Home, so that anthology is out with my story Last in a Long Line, which is a little more creeping dread. There's a bit of a mix. This is the first Prelude Eve. The second one has a spider on it. So Prelude Eve 1, 2, and 3. The best thing, if you've never read anything, there's two ways to go about getting some of my work handily is Pray Lady 1, 2, and 3 come as a series on Kindle books. So for about $8, something like that, you can get all three of them, which is the best deal. And if $8 is too dear, you can subscribe to my newsletter. So heading over to typicalbooks.com or lydiapeever.ca, you can sign up for the newsletter and you get Pray Lady 1 and 2 as a PDF for free. So, yeah.
That's nice. I think you had told me about that before, but then you were so kind and you sent me copies.
I couldn't pass it up, not only to be among other Canadian authors in an amazing gift basket from you. That was super freaking cool because it's not enough of that, sort of. I'm also in a gift basket. I should have checked on that. I didn't hear back from the person. My Pray Lady 3 and 1 and 2 were offered as a package as well as a giveaway. I just don't remember where all of a sudden I just remembered, but there aren't enough of that. And you're right. There's very few Canadian horror authors to have us sort of gathered up, alongside. I don't remember everyone that was in it, but Eddie Generous had a part in that. Did he not?
No, there was. So Jason was a part of that. Marcus Hawk was a part of it. And yourself. I'm trying to remember if there was. No. I was going to reach out to Mike Thorne, but then I realized that I had all male Canadian authors and I needed to have a woman in there. And so I was like, oh, Lydia, why aren't I asking Lydia? Right. And I offered to pay for the books from everyone, and everyone was so kind. And they're like, no, I will just contribute. Like, this is amazing. Where do I send the books? And I'm like, I'll pay you. I'll pay you for the books. I'll pay you for the shipping. That's actually how I met. Well, I shouldn't say met Tim. I was friends with Tim, or we were connected on Twitter and Instagram, but I did not realize that he was a fellow Canadian. And so he reached out to me on YouTube. He's like, hey, if you're ever doing another one of these, like, I'd love to take part. And I'm like, this is exciting because I knew of him and I knew of his work, but I didn't know that he was a fellow Canadian. So maybe it's been a while. Maybe it's time that I need to set up another I think it was
Canadian. It was such good timing because we've all been sort of at home, and many authors have stacks of books in their houses that were meant to bring with them to events that they're not going to and haven't been going to, right? So I know that was the boat I was in. I was like, I have boxes of these things, so I will gladly send you as many as you jolly well please. I see Mindy in the chat, so hello, Mindy. Hello.
Yes, absolutely. She snuck in there.
Favorite booktuber.
Well, I think it's time that maybe we'll have to do another one. And that's the thing, is finding Canadian horror authors is not easy, but finding female Canadian horror authors is even harder. So I was like, I've got all male authors here. I need to find. And then that's when you popped into my mind. And I'm like, you know what? I haven't checked out any of her work. I haven't read any of it. I'd love for her to be a part of it. And then you were so kind and you sent me copies. And then I devoured them and realized how much I love your writing. And that just made me just adore you even more, because I adore your content, what you put out there, what you do in the community. And then now I adore your writing and your writing style. So yeah, it just.
Well, thank you.
And you're Canadian. I'm just going to keep throwing it out there.
Yeah, I'll hint at you off air a few, some other like female horror authors from Canada that come to mind.
Please, yes.
Especially ones that, like, I'm just going to say Gemma Files. Oh my gosh, Gemma Files. Got to read Gemma Files. But yeah, there's other authors that, yeah, we all hide, and we're not all, like, we're so humble, I suppose. It's the Canadianness. So I know that's part of my problem. So yeah.
It's true. It's true. I did reach out a while ago on Twitter and I said, I need some more Canadian authors or Canadian indie and small press authors in my life. And I said, it doesn't have to be horror, but if it is horror, dark fiction, I mean, that's the icing on the cake for me. And there were a few females that were here and there, but some of them either don't have a piece that's out yet or they're working on it. So I would absolutely adore that, because I love supporting all authors. But if they're Canadian,
yeah, we'll have a little brainstorm after.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd appreciate that. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, first off, Lydia, for coming on and chatting with me and hanging out. Just being able to have that chat, but also getting to promote you a little bit, since, you're always out there promoting everybody else. And
I always feel weird injecting my other stuff. Like, oh yeah, I do the Horror Writers Association moderate the new releases. Did I submit my latest book, Pray Lady 3, as a new release yet? No, because I'm lazy. But it's coming. But it's out. So Right,
That's
ladies?
just more of a push to become an HWA member. So, I could be doing stuff like that. Just listen, recommend this and that and everything. Well, that's too exciting. And thank you for everyone that came in the chat, asked questions, chat with us, all of the compliments that came through. I'm saying hi to everybody here that's, oh, sorry, they're saying hi to each other. I thought they were saying goodbye here, so I thought I would pop it up. But thank you
Yeah, Mr.
so much.
Morningstar, hello. Yeah, it was really awesome. Really awesome to see everybody in this early Saturday morning.
Yes, that's the one thing I was worried about because I was like, you know what, everyone's probably going to be sleeping. It's Saturday. They've had a good party time on Friday, but no, they were really excited. Even Jay was excited, sharing it on Twitter, saying that he's working and that it gets to be his entertainment while he's working. So that means
Thank
a
you.
lot. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you for coming and hanging out with us. Lydia, you are welcome absolutely anytime. If you want to come on again or you want to come in on as a group of people, just give me a poke and we'll get that set up. And thank you to everyone. Absolutely. And now I'm being a typical Canadian and saying thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you over and over and over again. Perfect. Well, that's it for now. I will make sure to go and put all of Lydia's socials in the description right after we're done here, so you guys can go and just do the quick one click. Go follow her, support her. If you're not already subscribed, please go do so. Go pick up her work. Prelude Eve 3 just came out, so go and pick up all 3 because you're going to want to sit down and consume them from start to finish. Absolutely. And thank you. And I will see you guys all later.